have the itch to buy clothes and get new things, or like secondhand things from the thrift store. And before I do any of that, I thought it'd be a good idea to go through things I have here that I can turn into something else and make new and exciting, old clothes that I can transform, things I've thrifted that I want to upcycle. I have a bunch of ideas, so I'm excited to share with you the projects. First of all, I have a sweater that I thrifted a while ago that was oversized and really cozy, but I washed it and it shrunk, which always happens to me, even though this sweater was acrylic and nylon, I think. I don't think acrylic is supposed to shrink in the wash, but this one did, so I want to turn that into a beanie, something really cozy that folds over. I also recently lost my warmest beanie that was like a black knit hat from Everlane, and I lost it. I don't know where it is. So creating a brown one in a similar style I feel like would be a great replacement. And I need to constantly wear hats when I go outside because I'm very sensitive to the cold. The other projects I have are a lot of t-shirt upcycling. Well, first of all, I did get some fabric dyes, so the colors of all of these different t-shirts are really vibrant. Here's an example. I have this hot pink t-shirt that I thrifted a while ago, and I was thinking I could do a shirring project, which is where you put elastic into the bobbin, the lower thread on the sewing machine, and sew designs all over the shirt to create gathers and puckers in the shirt. I'm inspired by this one top by Shu Shu Tong, cream or white or something, and then it's got a bit of a grid of shirring, and then everywhere the grid meets there's like a little flower fabric or something. So I want to do that to this hot pink shirt. I do want to dye this. I got brown dye, and I also got a blue, a sort of like muted blue. So I thought either I would shirt and then dye this brown, or maybe do a sort of sheer blue dye bath that could turn this into like a purple sort of a color. I'm not like the most experienced with using dyes, with doing the Rit dyeing, but I'll still see what happens, I guess. If it doesn't come out all right, I'll figure out something. This is an experimental video. So this one's going to be machine shirred. I have a sweatshirt that's my own sweatshirt that I wear all the time. It does have a stain, like a paint stain on it, because I used to wear this to my painting class pretty much all last year. I have a vision to cut up t-shirts into scraps, like strips and shapes, and just kind of haphazardly sew them all over the place on this. I'm pretty sure I have a reference image somewhere on my Pinterest from a designer that did something similar to that, but I thought I could do that to this to zhuzh it up a bit, to cover some of the paint stains so that it could be more of a wearable piece rather than like a casual piece, because like this sweatshirt is my painting sweatshirt also because it has paint stains on it. So I'd like to have at least one that is a little bit more like cool or stylish or interesting. I also want to dye this into something a bit more neutral because the t-shirts that I have for cutting up are all different colors. So for example, I could cut up this orange t-shirt to be the strips all over it, and then I'm gonna try to dye them all together and just see what happens and hope that the shade, even though these aren't the same colors and I'm sure the dye is going to have different results, it'll be a little bit more cohesive. We'll see. That's the plan for that one. I also have this long sleeve red shirt that I want to add some ruffles to. This is also just something I thrifted for myself. What I want to do is, again, cut up t-shirts. I want to elongate the sleeves because this is a recurring theme on my channel. The sleeves are always too short. So I want to add like a ruffle sleeve that kind of fans out. I don't know. I probably will use another orange shirt or another hot pink shirt that I've thrifted, cut strips of fabric, and then do some kind of ruffle design. And I'm inspired by designers like Simone Roca, Cecily Benchin, I think that's how you say that designer's name, Molly Goddard, and the brand Damson Matter. This style of upcycling where I cut up t-shirts and applique them all over this shirt. I used to do this a lot when I was a teenager. That's basically how I learned how to sew, was upcycling t-shirts. I had a book that I got from Barnes & Noble that was all about cutting up t-shirts and sewing them back together. This feels very playful for me, and the dyeing stuff intimidates me, but the sewing, the cutting up t-shirts and sewing them onto other t-shirts is nature to me. But yeah, this one's gonna be ruffly, and I'll either dye it brown or blue as well. I'm just gonna get started with today's stuff that I want to do. And also, when I do the dye baths, I might ask my sister to help me because she's better at that than I am. I'm starting with the beanie project first. So I have the sweater I'm using, and I decided I wanted to make the hat double thickness. That way it could be a lining for itself and also be super warm. I cut the sweater into 2 rectangles, and I'm going to sew each side that's cut so that there's 2 tubes of fabric. And I'm just estimating the size. When I folded the sweater, the width looked like the size of a hat. Once I sewed the first tube, I checked how it fit my head, and it was fine. So I proceeded with the other tube of sweater material. Now I have 2 tubes of fabric. I'm going to turn one right side out and put it inside the other tube, lining up the seams. I'm going to sew it along the hem of the sweater. And turn it right side out. That's going to be the cuff of the hat. Now I'm trying it on to see how I have to shape the top of the hat. I have to trim quite a bit and try to angle it to be more head-shaped rather than tube-shaped. This took quite a bit of zhuzhing and adjusting, but eventually I got the hat to be, the shape that is a hat shape. Moving on to the ruffle long sleeve t-shirt. I'm cutting off the cuffs of this orange tee to be the ruffle sleeve extenders, and I also cut lots of strips of t-shirt for the ruffles. I'm gathering everything with a loose basting stitch. And I'm going to start with the sleeve ruffles, pinning them in place and sewing them down. I decided to repin it, not inside out, so that the top of the ruffle shows. So I'll sew it like that. Once those cuffs were sewn, I moved on to the ruffle applique details. I wasn't totally sure what design I wanted to do, but I gathered the strips of t-shirts so that I could play around with their placement. And I also did use a ruler to help me try to keep the design symmetrical when I figured out what I wanted to do. So I pinned it in place and sewed it down with my sewing machine, just with a normal straight stitch. It's difficult to visualize if this is working because the colors are so crazy. But I think I want to add another row of ruffles, either on the inside or the outside of this little arc. Another one inside. I added some ruffle around one of the armholes, so I'm going to do it on the other side too, and then pinned another arch on the inside of my first arch. It looks a little wonky even though I measured the placement of the ruffles coming out from the side seam. I think the situation is that the shirt itself is a little bit warped because it's secondhand or something, or just stretched out, but I'm going to continue. And then set this aside for the dye bath. It looks pretty crazy right now, so I have to have a lot of faith in dyeing this, that it'll look cool. The t-shirt tilts to one side a little bit, which is annoying. Not too bad though. I did start pinning more t-shirt strips to my red sweatshirt very haphazardly and sewing them down on my sewing machine. Before I finished that though, my sister came over to hang out and help me dye this stuff, as well as some other pieces we wanted to give a refresh to. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna dye the orange t-shirt first to see how it turns out and what shade of brown comes out, and you're gonna look, and if you do, then we'll dye the rest. And if you want to be like, I think it'll look better if it's a little warmer, okay, add another dye. I like that idea. It's very mysterious. Trash can. And you rinse it first. Okay. So that it's fully saturated. I rinse with hot water so that it's not a shock to the hot water of the dye. Okay. So you fully saturate it. Put her in there. We're gonna use the stick because the water is boiling hot. And we're gonna let her dunk and sit in there, which I think is nice. That's what I wanted. Really puts in perspective in Ever After when they fall into the hot dye baths at the end of the movie. Because I'm for sure it would be painful to die into a hot medieval dye bath. Yeah. Anyway. You better be careful. His paws are gonna get dyed. Purpley rack with the green bikini. Okay, back to this sweatshirt process. As you see, I did get at least half of it done before we dyed it. We dyed it with brown synthetic RIT dye, even though the sweatshirt and the t-shirts are probably 100% cotton or some kind of blend. It came out a bit more like a rust color, but I still think that's pretty, and it feels less aggressive than the bright red and the bright orange. Now what I'm doing is continuing this pinning process, and sometimes I'm folding these strips of fabric and sometimes I'm giving them a little pleat, but I'm trying to be as random as possible and just cover the whole space of the sweatshirt. At this point, I was really looking forward to finishing this video and all of the projects, so I was working pretty quickly, and I did decide to just try to pin the rest of the sweatshirt, like pin all of the strips of fabric onto the sweatshirt and have it be ready to be sewn, rather than doing it in stages where I pin a portion, sew a portion, pin a portion, sew a portion. So I did want to point that out because it's a lot easier to sew in stages so that you don't have to deal with as many pins everywhere, because it can get a bit sharp. But I decided to not care about that and just try to fill up this whole sweatshirt with pinned strips of fabric. Alright, so as far as sewing this goes, I'm using the strips of t-shirt as a guideline for what I want to be sewing on. For the most part, I'm sewing a straight line on top of all of these strips, pivoting where they curve, and moving the sweatshirt around as I need to, just to get all of the pins out of the fabric and to get all the bits of fabric sewn. I'm not being too precious though. This whole project is quite tedious, so I was making a point to let my stitches go where they go. If they go off the strips of fabric, that's fine. It's kind of an abstract piece and it's okay if it's messy. That's a bit of the point. So sometimes I would even just let the stitch be continuous. Once a strip of fabric was done being stitched, I just keep stitching and try to find the next strip of fabric. The most challenging part of this was definitely the sleeves because they're such a tight part of the top. In the past, when I've done scrap t-shirt projects where I'm covering a whole t-shirt or sweatshirt with scrap fabric, usually I will cut open the side seam so that I don't have to deal with the tube that is the sleeve. But I didn't want to do that this time because I didn't want to mess with the size of the sweatshirt. So I'm just being extra careful. I kind of want to add more. The very last project I have is this t-shirt. It was hot pink and now it's a bit of a magenta because my sister helped me dye it using a smoky blue dye, and this is the color that came out. I'm gonna do a shirring project. Just letting you know, this did not come out how I had originally envisioned, and that's kind of my own hastiness and lack of planning. I'm gonna kind of speed through this description because this top is the one project that didn't really come out how I wanted, but I'll let you know what I'm doing. I'm starting out by cutting out a new neckline. I'm making it a bit wider because I know that the elastic thread is going to gather this up to be a bit tighter, and I also am giving it a bit more of a square neckline because that's just my preference. I'm also going to cut off the manufactured hems along the sleeves and along the bottom of the top. In my opinion, they're just a bit too chunky for a project like this. Like, I've done this before and I don't like the way that the hems gather, so I like to take those away and make it a little bit more lightweight, and I'm just going to hem that with a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine. For shirring projects, you need to have elastic thread where your bobbin thread would be. So I hand wind all of my elastic thread bobbins because you can't do it on the sewing machine, it just like won't work. I have this massive cone of black elastic thread that I think I got off of Etsy, and I like to make a few backup bobbins because while you're doing projects like this, it uses up the thread very quickly. So it's nice to have a bunch of backup ones ready to go. So the premise of this project was that I wanted to do grid stitches using my elastic thread and make the top a bit more fitted, but having a bit of a puffy, ruffly, textured look to it. And the fatal flaw the mistake I made was that I didn't make my stripes of thread wide enough. I had them pretty tight. I don't really know what I was thinking. I just was going with it. Sometimes I'm just kind of in the zone and I'll keep working, and I wasn't really thinking back to my original inspiration image, and what ended up happening was I just gathered way too much fabric, so it became a smaller and smaller top. It's not terrible, but it's not what I had in mind. All right, everyone. Now that I finished all of the projects, I thought I'd share how they came out. Not all of them came out exactly how I wanted them to, but some of them I really like this one. This is probably my favorite. I'm wearing it today, casually. The color, it's interesting. It didn't come out brown, even though that was what the dye was, but it's very rusty. This was the bright orange and this was bright red, and I do like how it came out. It's definitely not what I envisioned, but I'm fine with it. And I think I'm gonna end up wearing it all the time. And what's cool too is it'll probably be fine to wear in the spring and fall as well as the winter. I just might need to layer a long sleeve top underneath this to make it extra warm, or wear something over it, of course. Next, I will show you the hat. For the hat, this is definitely the one I've been getting the most use out of. This is the one that I made first out of all the projects. It did take me a lot of time to finesse the lumpiness of the top of it, and it's still quite lumpy. And I did just wash this in the washing machine, and it feels a little bit tighter than how it first was. I took it out to dry, or to not dry in the dryer, but I'll try this on. I'm just gonna style it with a different outfit, so. What did I just step in? So, like I said, I've been wearing this hat a lot lately. It's extremely warm. I do think the brown works with me better than my black hat did, which I made this to replace it. The top is still a bit lumpy, but you can't really tell when it's on. Maybe you can. I don't really mind. When I stretch it low onto my head, I feel like it's less noticeable. I have a little vintage shirt on with, this is probably my coolest coat that I own. It's over a decade old, from ASOS, which I don't shop at anymore, but I do still have this relic, and it's like an eggplant purple, super fuzzy kind of a fabric, but it's not the warmest coat. I do tend to wear my black puffer coat in the winter time, which is kind of depressing, but it keeps me warm. So yeah, I've been wearing this hat a lot. This was definitely super useful, and I'll continue to wear it through the winter, even though it's a little bit lumpy. I just have to be careful about washing it and not shrinking it more. I thought that you could only shrink things one time, but that might not be the case. Yeah. And I just got these sunglasses for myself as a Christmas gift. They're by the brand Corlin. I think they're Swedish or Scandinavian. The tariffs were not pleasant, and I regretted that whole situation, but they are pretty cool, and I do have a thing for sunglasses, so I'm gonna be lazy and just keep my comfy pants on for all the styling. Here's how the sweatshirt came out. Same colors as the top that I made, which I feel a little bit like I shouldn't keep both of them because I don't need two pieces that are this exact shade of rusty reddish orange. But I do really like how this came out. It's very funky and artsy. It just has that fabric manipulation look that makes me very happy. It's quite warm for a sweatshirt that's an old sweatshirt that's been worn a lot and then sewn all over. It still has a bit of a softness to it, which is cool. I do think I'd wear this a lot, but part of me also just wants to sell it in my shop and try to remake another one for myself in another color story and just keep experimenting with this style of sewing. But I do really like how this one came out. I think it's pretty cool. I'd love to see this paired with like a gray skirt, a long gray skirt, like a soft gray, or maybe a beigey color bottom. I mean, black works okay. I want to try to style this clip in my hair. I'm struggling with my hair and I am getting it cut soon. Why does this look so crazy? I feel like I did my hair like that. Put a bun in my hair and then clipped it this past weekend, and I really liked how it looked, but now I can't get it right. I don't think that works. Okay. It's funny, I used to wear necklaces like this all the time, and now I think it looks kind of silly. Here is the last thing I worked on for this thrift flip. I mean, it doesn't look terrible. It's a choice. Well, actually, the whole thing about this was that it wasn't really a choice, and I was just kind of working haphazardly and not being precise about measuring or caring about knowing what degree of gathers was going to end up happening, and it resulted in a very shrunken, puckered t-shirt. I don't think it looks terrible. I'm not gonna wear like a crop top. I'm thinking on its own probably ever again, but I like it layered over something else. If I had a white button down, I feel like that'd be really fun to layer a piece like this over. I do love the puckering. I love fabric manipulation. I think I made my gathers too close together, and if I really wanted the effect of the top that I had originally been inspired by, I should have kept them spaced way more apart, and then it also wouldn't have like shrunk quite as much. The color also, it's really interesting. So this was a hot pink shirt, and then my sister helped me dye it in a sort of smoky blue dye bath, and this is how it came out. It's just a bit more magenta, which is not really one of the colors that I gravitate towards, but it's not terrible. I just don't really know what to do with this because it came out a bit like a mistake, but I guess that just happens with sewing projects sometimes. You don't know what you're gonna get, and but I don't know that I'm gonna wear this. So maybe I'll donate it, maybe I'll put it in my Etsy shop for very cheap or something, if anyone wants to have a fun piece or likes wearing crop tops or something. That's the last thing that I made in this thrift flip video, which has been a bit of a saga because I started it back around Thanksgiving and now it's the new year. So I'm very excited to be wrapping this up. Hopefully by the time I share this video, I have reopened my Patreon because I'm planning on making Patreon videos as well. So if you want to check that out, it's open, and right now it just has an archive of videos from a couple years ago, but I'm going to be putting some new stuff on there very soon. That's what I'm going to work on this week, probably a sewing project of some sort. And besides that, I hope you like this video, and thank you for watching. Links below to all the stuff, all the various things like my Etsy shop and my Substack, and I'll be back soon with another video. Bye.